Welcome to the Stained Glass Studio. Our studio is located in the back of the parking area of Building 2, so it can be a little bit hard to find. It's near the back elevator, so it's way in the back. But we want to welcome you to our studio. Here's an inside view of our glass room. It's got a variety of things in it, which we'll be demonstrating as we go forward to illustrate how to create a stained glass piece. And here we have the tools that we have. We have a wide variety of tools for helping us make a stained glass piece. We'll be illustrating the use of some of those as we go along to create our piece.
All right, now underneath those tools, what we have below is a number of pieces of our equipment, electrical equipment that we can use in stained glass working. On our left, we have one of our two grinders. Next is the other grinder. Over in the third from the left, the red item there is a glass saw, which you use in a little more advanced levels of work with the glass. And on the far right is the light box, which we use for tracing designs onto patterns. You'll see a little bit more of that a little bit later on.
Okay, here's one of our glass cabinets. We have a wide variety of glass, several of the cabinets like this, and they're for use of the people who are members of the stained glass group and for class members to use as they wish.
I'm Keith Berg, a resident here at Okamic, and I've been the instructor for a number of stained glass classes held here for residents of Okamic. And today I want to review and demonstrate each of the steps that are involved in making a stained glass piece. This video is not meant to substitute for taking a stained glass class, but rather to provide an overview of the basic steps involved. A class in stained glass would do quite a bit more, of course. It would provide the hands-on experience that you really need and direct experience with the instructors, and it would allow us time to do much more detail than we can provide here. But you will get a good sense of what goes into making a piece of glass. What we will do as part of making this piece of glass is I will be making an actual piece of glass. This is a window for a resident here at Okamic. And although this piece is a little bit bigger than you would typically start with as a stained glass piece here at Okamic, it is nonetheless follows all of the same steps that you would with any piece of stained glass that you're going to make. So there are 5 steps that are involved in making a stained glass piece, and we'll be taking you through each of those steps. The 5 steps involved are: 1. Creating and locating a design that shows each piece and choosing glass for each of those pieces. Step 2. Cutting out those particular glass pieces and fitting them into the design. And 3. Putting copper foil around the edge of each piece of glass, or using lead cane. We won't be showing the lead cane technique, but that is a technique that's usable. Step 4 is soldering together the separate pieces of foiled glass into a single piece. And then step 5, some parts of which are optional here, is adding edging onto it so that it has a nice solid border and it strengthens the piece. Putting hooks on if you want to hang it in a window, which is what I would recommend when possible, since it's much different when you look at it in the light and not in the light. and the patina, or a coloring of that soldering joints, that will normally change color and gradually add their own patina, but if you want a little more control over it, you can add the patina. So now we're going to be taking each of those 5 steps one at a time, and as we do that, I'll be demonstrating that. And on the video, there will be links so that you can jump ahead. If you're familiar with parts of this or want to review them again, you will be able to jump ahead to any part of the video that you'd like. So now we're at step 1, and that involves the locating of the design and creating your own design. And transferring that onto the glass, that's the next part of that step 1. And then labeling that design, that's the next step in step 1, next part in step 1. And then finally we're going to be choosing colors and types of glass that you want to put into that design. So let's take a look at some of the kinds of things that you have a choice. So locating, where would you find a design for a stained glass piece? Well, there's several possibilities here. One, of course, is to look at the many, many books that are available commercially, online, Amazon, whatever. For example, here's one that's called Tropical Breezes, and it has a genre of tropical kinds of birds and flowers. And here's one that's just sort of on birds and flowers also, but more typical birds and flowers that aren't tropical. And here's one that's a Christmas design one. So for example, we can get pictures of candles and so on, all at Christmas trees and flowers, poinsettias and so on. And here's the cover of one with a Christmas book. So, the other possibility is simply not to buy the books, but just simply search online with, say, Google or your favorite search engine. And if you do that, you might find a design that looks like this. This is an angel, a relatively simple one. And we'll be actually drawing a piece from this when we show you the next part of step 1. And finally, of course, you can just draw your own. I wouldn't recommend you start that way until you're familiar with all the limitations and the kinds of things you can do in glass and the kinds of things you can't do so well. But a good place to start is with a simple design. You can search online for exactly that, simple stained glass designs. All right, now the next part that we have with this, we're going to be transferring, how do we get that design? We have the design now, whatever we picked, how do we get it onto a piece of glass? And for this, we're going to be moving over to the light box so I can show you one of a couple of different ways of putting it onto the glass. So we've now put our design for the angel on top of our light box, and what you can see is you can see light through it. And I'm going to draw one particular piece to demonstrate this. This is piece W1, and I've labeled it that way because it's going to be a white color, and I'll talk more about the labeling in a minute. And we put our glass on top of that, and if the glass isn't too dark, we can see the light right through onto the glass. And then you simply take a marking pen and you start following the lines that you can see. So I'm drawing that one piece and following the lines as I see them through the glass. And you want to be quite careful with that, of course. This is what you do. And so now we have piece labeled W1 drawn onto the glass. And of course you would do that with every single one of those pieces in whatever color you want to make them in. All right, then that worked fine on that piece of white glass and lighter glass, but what if you have a darker piece of glass, such as this red glass, and this particular piece of red glass is actually opaque, and I'll talk more about your glass selections later. But let's say you wanted to draw part of the pattern on that. Maybe the lady's hair. I don't know why you would make it in red, but some part of this. I lay it on here, and now I can't see anything of the design through this piece of glass. So what do we do in that case? In that case, we do a pattern. We draw out. So what I would do, here's a piece of a different piece of glass. I would take each of these pieces and I would cut them out in a heavier cardboard. I have it copied onto a heavier piece of cardboard, and I cut them out of that cardboard. And then I don't even need to use the light box. I can just lay it on here, and I would simply, I won't go through all of this, but I would simply trace around this piece. This is an actual piece from something, a design that I will show you a little later. And there we have it. We have that piece of glass cut out. Now, as you remember, I showed you, mentioned something about labeling that piece of glass. And now, why does that come up? Let me show you a little bit about another design. When you do design a piece of glass and have a piece of glass that's got a design, often if you get them from a book, say, you will get something like this. This is a picture of the bird, and it's got an A, B, C, D kind of labeling on it. So here we've got another design. This is a fairly simple design of a bird, maybe a robin, and you'll notice on each piece of this there's labels going from A, B, and C, and D, and so forth. And that's one way to label it simply, or doing it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But there's actually a little bit better way to label the glass. Now here's a design. This is actually the piece that I drew on the red glass previously, by the way. This is the design that we typically use in the beginning class where we're doing some stained glass work. And here we have a little bit different labeling. I've got some pieces labeled all A1, A2, A3. We've got some A4, A5, and A6, and so on. But we also have some pieces labeled B, B1, B2, and so forth, C1, C2, D1, and D3. The reason for labeling it that way is each letter that it begins with is from a particular color or type of glass. And so we might, if we use that kind of design, for example, then wind up with a piece of glass that look like this, with each of those colors coming associated with a label. And then, of course, as we cut the pieces of glass, as we did, or traced our pieces of their design on our glass, we would, as we draw them, I would label this piece W1, because that's what we called it here. And when we did this piece down here, I would label that one A1. If we cut out patterns, then as soon as we cut them out, we know right where it goes back. All right. So now we've got our pieces drawn onto the glass, and we've got our pieces labeled. What's the next step? The next part of, not the next step, the next part of step 1 is to choose our glass. What kind of glass do we want to have? So here with our angel, I chose some white glass, say, for example, because that's so typical of the dresses of an angel. But there are really all kinds of glass. And this is one of the things that makes working in glass so much fun, because you have this enormous variety of the kinds of glass. And I want to give you just a little bit of a sense of it, because there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of pieces. Now, previously, we drew with the pattern onto this piece of red glass, and that's because we had to do that particularly with this piece of red glass, because the light would not come through this. This is called opaque glass. And we've got some red opaque glass, and we've got some blue opaque glass. These pieces of glass are also, though nice colors, are also kind of boring. There's just that color blue, period. What if we liked a little more variety? So, for example, what if we wanted something like this? Now, that's not red, it's not green, it's not brown, it's a kind of a mix. There's no reds in there, but there is greens and browns mixed together. And those are mixed together in a very linear pattern. What if we had something like this? Now, this is a little more swirly looking, different whites and browns. So you have those kinds of mixes of colors as well as regular colors. And then we had a opaque blue. You can also get things that are very transparent looking. So this is just a light blue, but you can see through it. You could see my hands through it, for example. And different kinds of glass. Now, so there's colors, there's different mixes of colors, but there's also what we call different textures of glass. So these are best shown, they exist in all kinds of glass, but they're best shown on clear glass. So for example, this is one dramatically different kind of piece of glass where you see the texture of the clear glass. Would be obscuring things that were behind it, used in like showers. There's other kinds of even more interesting. This is one I love. I can't figure out where I'm going to use it yet, but I love these swirly designs like this in the pattern in the glass. And those exist on pieces of colored glass as well as clear glass. So there are all kinds of different possibilities you can use. In fact, one of the problems people have when we start the glass is not being able to select from all of the pieces. Here in the glass room, we are very fortunate because a number of wonderful people who had a history of doing glass work but were no longer going to be able to continue that, have donated their glass that they had left over. Everybody who does glass work seems to wind up with more glass than they need. And they've donated it here at Okamic so that when you take a beginning class, you will have an enormous selection of glass that's available to you for glass work. You don't have to go out and buy that glass. It's really a wonderful a donation by many generous people. And now what happens if you just, despite all of the glass we have here, you just can't find quite the right piece of glass for you? And I'll tell you, this does happen a lot. You have something in mind for your design that you want a special kind of glass. Where else can you get that? Well, of course, there's always online. There are at least a half a dozen different online stores that you can buy glass from. I'm personally never very satisfied with buying glass online because sometimes what you see online and the pictures on your monitor or in a catalog, if you get a printed catalog, are never quite what you get. It is often very difficult to show the particulars of glass. So Fortunately, there's also places, and one of these places is right here in Gainesville, where you can walk into the glass store and pick your glass yourself right from the shelves there. The one in Gainesville is called McIntyre Studios. It's a wonderful place up in Thornbrook Village, if folks are familiar with that. But another place is down in Sarasota. That's the next closest one that I'm familiar with that has a good selection of glass. And sometimes you'll even drive down to Sarasota, or you're just taking a vacation in that area, and you'll go and look at the glass to see what they have. So one more aspect of glass that I haven't yet mentioned is that, and this is another part of the glass, that this is not true for any other art medium that I'm familiar with, and that is that the aspects of the glass can change dramatically from when you show the light in front of the glass, such as in the evening time when it's dark outside, late evening, and you see it from the lights inside, versus when during the daytime when most of the stronger light would be coming through the window if you have a piece in the window. And I'll show you some examples of this kind of thing. So here is an example of a piece of glass work that I did for a friend of mine. It's a nice sort of cross with it. And this is what this piece looks like when it's front lighted. Now, when we take and move that into the sunlight and let it be backlighted, this is what you see. This is the same piece of glass as you saw before. And here is that, I'll show them both to you. The one on your left is the front lighted, and the one on your right is the backlighted. So, depending on the glass you choose, that distinction will be less evident or more evident. With pieces that are less transparent and you get less light through them, it'll be less evident. And sometimes it just depends on the kind of particular qualities of the glass that are other than that. Certainly if you use opaque glass, by implication, you won't see any light through them. But most kinds of glass you will see at least some kinds of changes and notice differences in the texture. The texture often comes out much better when it's backlighted. So these are all of the parts that are involved in step one. On the next session, we'll go into the cutting of that glass and show you how you get that and the fitting of that glass into it. And we'll be using one of our boards to do that, but we'll take that second step on in the next session.